Hey, listen to Wrestling Roundup on FreeFM, ArrowFM, and MP. As always, I'm Grady, and live on Skype we got Josh.
Hey.
And welcome to one of the special episodes while Grady is out of the country over the Christmas, New Year, January period. The theme for this episode is gonna be our top 10 WWE tag teams of all time. Again, no ordering. It's just us throwing out some of our favorite tag teams, some of the most popular tag teams from across the times. And I'm going to let Josh kick us off with his first one.
Let's go Demolition.
Demolition. A little bit before my time, but I always knew them as the opposite. That's not right. Standing opposite the Road Warriors. Like those two were the two tag teams when you talk about old school tag teams doing really well.
They were definitely WWE's answer to the Road Warriors when they were working in Jim Crockett Promotions, which became WCW. They were a good tag team. They were obviously before the New Day, before the Usos, the longest reigning tag team of all time. And they did it in an era where tag team wrestling was was much more important then than it ever has been now. So it was very important era when they did that. It's just you have to, when it comes to tag teams and WWE, you have to respect Demolition.
Yeah, it's really hard when you're making a historic list to not put them there. As you say, their accolades speak for it. They also started this whole, the whole looking similar, faces painted up, gear looking the same. That, continues through now. You look at them and you're like, that is a tag team unit. They're going to work together well. And then they come out and they put on decent tag team matches. My first throw onto this list, I even know, I'm going to throw a dart at my list to pick someone. I'm going to pick someone in the, let's just go Brothers of Destruction. Not often a tag team, but two massive stars in Undertaker and Kane. Kane having other big tag teams as well with like X-Pac and co. But I think these two as a unstoppable duo were always a scary sight to have on the other side of the ring.
Yeah, this is definitely a case of what plagued WWE when it came to tag teams, and still does to this day, and it's just the random main eventers being thrown together because we need a tag team in the division because we don't care about it in the first place. In this case, it's not so much a random tag team because since the day Kane debuted, they've been intertwined with their stories. So, but it's just two main eventers working together. How do you expect the tag team division actually supposed to beat that?
It is funny because, I look at my list and I'm like, there are very few pure tag teams, I guess, on this list of names that I may bring up. But yeah, it was two formidable foes, and the sum of their pieces was greater than they worked well together. The characters worked well together, and the period where they were tag teaming together, they worked well as a tag team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it helps out that, Undertaker's definitely one of the best to do it. Kane's probably, at least top 50 odd. And yeah, the supernatural powers also worked well together. And it's one of those things where you look back at Kane and Undertaker and you go, were they better when they were teaming together? Were they better when they were feuding? And I think there was some golden moments from both of them for sure. Who you got next?
Speaking of what I just said...
Look, we're just going to put a caveat. There's going to be a lot of just tag teams that were put together, okay? When you're trying to scrape together a list of the best WWE tag teams of all time, there ain't a lot of teams that were put together to be tag teams.
Yeah. I was going to say one that was put together, but actually makes a lot of sense, and that's Money Inc. Ted DiBiase and Erwin R. Scheitzer.
Yeah, it's again, it was a case of the characters working well together, right? A millionaire and the tax man. Could you have more better villains than that as a tag team?
No, and they were the chief opponents when it came to the Mega Powers.
Mm-hmm.
It was it was a short run, but it was an important run. And it was also the vehicle that debuted the Undertaker we just talked about.
Yeah, it's crazy that was like the same era. But yeah, it was two gimmicks worked really well together, and although you might not remember, Ted DiBiase as his tag team stuff or Iris as his tag team stuff, as you say, it was so important in the era, whether it be villains for the tag teams, whether it just be villains of the company, what is better than one really strong villain being the foil to everybody? Two really strong villains being the foil to everybody and just getting on everybody's nerves. And it worked really well, and you can't get better than those two. Alrighty, now I gotta look at my list again. Let's go for more main event stars put together. This one might be a bit of a bigger discussion topic because I'm just gonna jam so many things together, and I'm gonna just go with the general umbrella of D-Generation X. As this includes New Age Outlaws, this includes Triple H and HBK later on. This is just the whole big green umbrella.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's at least with Triple H's, there was always a tag team.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes sense. Everything these are, you can't do anything retrospective with wrestling without including in some way or shape or form DX. Whether it was just the childish sophomore humor of the original DX, and then getting their butts kicked night in, night out, or just the army that Triple H created after Shawn's injury, and the stuff that the New Age Outlaws did, which elevated D-Generation X, even though they only really ever said 3 lines.
That was all they needed to say.
Yeah, they got over, and they were a chief part of the Attitude version of the tag team of when the tag teams became more important during the Attitude Era.
Yeah, because
at least they led into probably 3 of our picks later on.
Yeah, there's 3 Attitude Era picks that I'm pretty sure are locking 3 of the remaining 6 slots right now that we will get to, but DX, like slightly earlier than that as the New Age Outlaws as well. I have vivid memories of just the comedy that these guys would put on, whether it just be Road Dogg in the Royal Rumble hugging the bottom rope the whole time, or whether it is them actually doing well and picking up wins. Didn't happen often, but sometimes those New Age Outlaws were able to pick up some victories here and there. Or the later iteration where Triple H and Shawn Michaels were just tagging together later on in the 2000s. Same thing as we said about the Brothers of Destruction, right? You put 2 of your biggest main event stars together and who can really go against them. And it was a force to be reckoned with on that side. It was a comedic genius on the other side. It really was, DX was synonymous throughout that Attitude Era. Everybody was telling their friends to do the catchphrase. I don't know if the catchphrase floats for radio, so I'll skip it. everybody knew the intro, the full intro, and there's a reason that it's one of the like nostalgia acts that gets pulled out every time there's an anniversary show. A, because Triple H and Co are running the business, but B, it's something that still, pops a crowd. People like to see him get together, and people like to see him do the whole shtick.
Yep.
Alrighty, who's next on the list?
The Dudley Boys.
Alrighty, we're starting. Because this is going to start a trio of discussions, I'm sure.
Yeah. There is something to be said for what they did with the tag team division, making it as important as the main singles guys were, and that's not easy to do. Just ask the Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express, who did that in the 80s. It's just one of those situations where it's like Dudley Boys have been phenomenally successful no matter where they went. They have racked up many title reigns, many title reigns, and they've done pretty much everything.
Yeah, do we want to fold all three of these teams in and just discuss them in one go? Because I feel like it's a little bit easier.
They're linked together forever in a day.
If anybody doesn't know what three teams we're talking about, it's the TLC trio, the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, and Edge and Christian. And when you talk about making tag teams important, that is the trio. That is, people were tuning in for their matches in whatever combination we were seeing it, the same that people were tuning in for the other stars of, be it Attitude or New Generation a little bit later on.
Yeah, they stole the show so many times. The ladder match that they had pre-TLC at WrestleMania 2000 was one of the two bright spots in the entire show, because that show was awful. But the triple threat tag team ladder match, and a match I won't talk about because one of the people in it has been redacted over the years, is like the reason to watch that show.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had WrestleMania 17 with TLC 2, which was, again, another phenomenal tag team match with a moment that will never be forgotten because it's always shown. The spear in midair, that is for the tag team wrestling, that is Mick Foley being thrown off the steel cage for tag team wrestling.
Yeah, and as you have to also consider, I guess, the singles careers of all six of these guys, and they've all done amazing things afterwards. They all reached their heights, but when we're talking about a Triple H and Shawn Michaels or a Brothers of Destruction, we're talking about two guys who were main event talents put together and still made a good tag team. I feel like these three were three tag teams that, when split apart, still made really good upper mid-card main event guys. And that's the sort of the difference maker here. If I was to be looking at these six guys, if I'm looking at a Matt Hardy, I'm looking at a Devon Dudley, I'm saying, like, these guys, tag team dudes through and through. And do you want to see the Dudley Boys, or do you want to see Bubba Ray Dudley come on out? And I'm going to vote the Dudley Boys 10 times out of 10.
Yeah. I would agree with you on that. These three teams will always be synonymous with each other. The wars they had in the 3 or 4 years that they did them is just one of those situations where it's like every so often I have to go back and, like, I need to watch something from these guys, just because it happens so fast, so frequently. You didn't catch everything, and it was just, they were just amazing matches, amazing workers for the most part. I have my opinions about the Hardy Boys, but I will give them their due. They were a big tag team in the day. And I'll leave it at that.
Let's all just pretend they stopped working at, like, 2010. Okay? Just draw a line there.
No, 2003.
Okay. You're drawing your line way earlier. But yeah, if someone's talking about this tag team highlight that they have in their head, it probably features one of these three teams. We may have put them in the middle of the list, but I'm sure when I rang you up and I was like, hey, let's do a top WWE tag teams, these are the first three you put on the list.
Well, the Dudley Boys was. I will say that. I'd forgotten about the Hardy Boys and Edge and Christian until I got to about 5 and 6.
Well, they're my 1, 2, and 3.
But yeah, you can't go. It's just they are arguably the greatest tag teams in the history of the company, outside of maybe 2 options that we'll probably get to in the last 3.
As much as our Attitude Era and New Generation sort of era was locked up by those 3, I think you're right. I think 2 more slots are locked up, assuming we're talking about some rival teams that have gone back and forth over the years, recently, but that leaves 1 slot that isn't theirs. So I guess who do you want to give that last slot to that isn't going to ND or you?
You know what? I'm going to give the Acolytes some love.
Yeah.
The APA.
They were on my list.
They were phenomenal as a tag team. And then the vignettes, the promos and stuff of them just shooting the breeze, drinking beer, and kicking A.
Yeah, I think it worked really well. Like, it's not often that tag teams survive massive gimmick changes, and this one surely did. We had the Acolytes, we got the corporate ministry, more sort of spooky, occulty kind of stuff, and then, as you say, the everyman beer drinking, same sort of stuff that Stone Cold Steve Austin doing, the poker games, the mercenaries for hire or protection for hire kind of stuff, and they did well under both. They did the comedy, they did the in-ring. Love them or hate them when it comes to the person behind the gimmick, they were a damn good tag team.
Yeah. And again, it had to do with that was who they were. That everything you saw on the television when it came to those 2 guys in that role as the APA was who they were at the end of the day.
Personalities turned up to 11, right?
Yep. And that's the thing that's always worked the best in wrestling, is just you, but extra exaggerated.
And I think the thing that everyone that we've had on this list so far has in common, and the last 2 that'll get on it as well, is that they had that chemistry with each other. When, we talked about a lot of these teams just being main eventers shoved together, but there's a reason that I'm going to try and randomly think off the top of my head and fail here. Like, John Cena and Orton as a team aren't on here. You can't just put 2 exact main eventers together. They still have to click, and they still have to do well. And in the Acolytes and APA's case, those 2 just hanging out, shooting the SHIT constantly, and it translated to TV, and it did really well. Don't know why I spelt it out. I feel like that got me around senses somehow. I could have just said poop instead. Now I'm a spelling bee person.
By the way, honorable mention for the Shield, just because we're...
Oh, yeah, wrap it up here. Yeah, I had the Shield. I had Miz and Morrison as well, a favorite of mine.
Yeah, on my version, I just specifically put Roman and Seth.
Yeah.
Specifically. Because Dean was never part of the tag team.
No. Meant to be the singles guy. See how that all shook out. Well, our last 2 slots then. I guess it's pretty obvious where they're going. Both of them are going to be shared by the Bushwhackers, right?
Oh, I did love them as a kid. No, obviously we're talking about the New Day and the Usos.
Which, much like the other 3 teams that we talked together as a unit, really the New Day and the Usos are a unit here.
Yeah. Until they came along, there was arguments about who was the greatest tag team of all time. Some could say Demolition because they had the longest title reign. Some could say the Hart Foundation was on my list as well.
That's true.
Simply because they were the best technical tag team. But at the end of the day, it's one of these 2 teams. They have dominated in such a way that it's made you pay attention to the tag team division, even if there isn't enough bodies to really do anything with it. Which is why we get so many of their matches together.
Yeah.
But they were always bangers. And you had the New Day become the longest reigning tag team champions. They've had the titles so many times. They transitioned the titles from the Universal to Undisputed to the Copper titles, then the Silver titles because they were champions for so long that the Copper titles became Silver. And then they were the last bastion of hope of stopping the Bloodline's Usos from becoming the longest reigning tag team champions. Because the Usos debuted and have been a tag team for 15 years, practically.
Yeah.
And it's just, these two teams are everything you want to be when you're a tag team. And it's just one of those situations where it's like, these were perfect. These were perfect together. Anytime you had them put in a match, you knew you were in for a good time. And they could usually pull something special out of any other tag team they were in the ring with. So, these two are 1A, whatever order you want to put, the greatest tag teams of all time in WWE.
And I think, like, it's really easy to look at the Usos' longevity, and just be like, yeah. But, like, you gotta think about how much they carried this division. Because I've pulled up the Wikipedia page here, right, for the Usos, and I'm just gonna run you down their big matches / big feuds they ended up having, right? We got the Hart Dynasty. Like, okay, at least that's a vague thing here. Nope. Goldust and Mark Henry. Vladimir Kozlov and Santino Marella. Mark Henry and Evan Bourne. Team, by the way. Mark Henry and Evan Bourne. Ezekiel Jackson and Trent Beretta thrown in there for a part of the core. David Otunga, Michael McGillicuddy. Kurt Hawkins, Tyler Rex. There was not a lot there that they were working with. And the Usos stuck it out, as you say, 15 years. Their most recent work, not as a tag team, but 15 years of slogging through, we talked about main eventers being put together, slogging through low card to mid card people being put together in the tag team division. And the New Day were like that light at the end of the tunnel. Finally another formidable team at the end of it there that they can spark off of each other and just drag each other up into the stratosphere.
Yeah. And you have to go back to how the New Day formed. You had Kofi, Big E, and just floundering
Woods
on the main roster. I know. I wasn't forgetting.
He wasn't floundering.
He wasn't wrestling, so he wasn't floundering.
That's true.
But you had them floundering, And then you had Woods come out and basically tell them, you're better than this. Come with me. Let's do something together. And then they did the whole church thing.
We ignore that part.
Yeah, fans didn't like it that much, but it was intentional. It was to make you hate them. Then they switched it up. They still did the claps and stuff, trying to get the gold, but they slowly got over. And as they got over, then they became faces, and then they got to work more and more with the Usos. And the Usos were just biding their time. They held titles, but they weren't really doing anything because there was nobody to do anything with.
Mm.
So when these two tag teams finally got to be unleashed in all their glory, they tore everything down. And they made it where their matches were just as important, if not more important, than the main event.
Yeah, and they continued throughout with like the bloodline stuff as well, that just pulled the Usos even further up. Alrighty, well, we'll call it there, I guess, as we're reaching about time. That has been our top 10 list of WWE tag teams of all time. It's been great talking to you.
Baby.
You can visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/WrestlingRNDup, or our Twitter page, twitter.com/WrestlingRNDup, or our YouTube page, youtube.com/WrestlingRNDup. You can actually catch all of our 600 odd episodes that we have recorded of this show over the last many, many, many years, all on that YouTube page. That was youtube.com/WrestlingRNDup. But we will catch you next week.